Well, y'all, welcome back to the Hillbilly Think Tank. I am Spencer Keck, coming at you live here from Tunnel Hills in Hardin County, Kentucky, where we live for three things: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Y'all, I am a retired Navy hospital corpsman, independent duty corpsman, like we talked about before, and I have the honor of having one of my very best friends from when I was in independent duty corpsman school here tonight with me again, and that is Deloy Shaw. I'm gonna call him Chief just because I think that's what he was in my book. How you doing, Knight?
Thank you. Thank you.
And
Glad to
Deloy,
be here.
you're coming at us live. You said from Stafford, Virginia, right?
Stafford, Virginia, right outside
Cool.
Quantico.
And of course, I've done some time in Quantico. Love it over there. Fredericksburg, Virginia is one of my favorite spots in Virginia. I actually enjoy Alexandria and that whole area too, Bethesda. But what kind of work are you doing now since you've retired from the Navy like myself?
Well, done a little bit of everything. Actually, I worked for the VA. I was working at the VA for a while down in North Carolina in Durham.
Did you
Uh,
and I both do the same type of job? Why not? Because I worked at the VA,
I
too
actually
before.
worked in the research area. I was one of their um, procurement. I would buy products and stuff like that for the researchers, different teams that they had over there. So
That's right. You had a yeah, a real job.
I,
That's awesome.
I'm not gonna say that.
So, well, we've both been around the block. Combat vets, both of us. We've both been, employees of the VA. I've moved on now to being a public school teacher. Like I was telling you earlier, I'm loving it. I was unfortunately, due to a stepdad in my life, deprived of an education from the seventh grade on. I was homeschooled. I missed out a lot. I was luckily I was an avid reader before that and had a very high vocabulary, but I missed out on a lot of math and science that I had to catch up on once I left home. And we're here to talk about that tonight. All right. Y'all, again, this tonight's going to be dedicated to two things. One, a historical story of another Navy veteran who later became an Army veteran, and it's a Kentucky native. I've told the story before, but I didn't have the perspective of another vet to bounce it off of because I'm just appalled by the fact that Kentucky, Elizabethtown, Louisville, quite a few places that this person we're going to talk about. He lived in Bowling Green. He lived in down in Franklin, Kentucky, even Georgetown, Kentucky. He's been forgotten, and yet he is an integral part of our not just Kentucky history, but U.S. history and military history. So let's kick it off. What did you think? I sent you his story, Deloy, and what did you think of it as a Navy man? Were you aware that he was a sailor for at least half of the Civil War?
I mean, this was very eye opening. I will tell you, I've never heard of this guy. Um, I mean, it's not like we had history, um,
Yeah.
this kind of history taught to us in the
Oh
Navy
man. Yeah, and we
or in
should
the
have,
military at all.
right?
So
Yeah,
I'm
and
sure
that's
about
you're
that.
right. And I just thought about that. We didn't. This should have been something we should have heard about in the Navy. So, guys, we're here to talk to you about the Colonel from Louisville, the real Kentucky Colonel. This is the story of Allen Allensworth, Reverend Allen Allensworth, and Colonel Allen Allensworth. So, again, if you just tuned in, you're here with the Hillbilly Think Tank. We've got me, Spencer Keck. I am a candidate for magistrate here in District 3, Hardin County, and I'm a public school teacher. We're both combat veterans, Navy veterans, and we're here to talk about someone that just blew us away. So, uh, just to dig right into it, we're going to talk about, again, Kentucky heroes. And not the ones that you find, just like Deloy said, not the ones you find in history books, but we should. I don't know why we don't. It's just amazing that I found this guy, and he should be in history books. And we know that some people are, some people aren't that should be, and this is one of them. So he climbed impossible mountains. So the rest of us, whether we're black, white, poor, just didn't matter, could stand on higher ground. And that was what the Navy allowed me to do. It allowed me to get out from underneath the poverty and abuse of a stepdad that wasn't from Kentucky. Unfortunately, my mom met him in Texas. And the Navy allowed me to get the education that I desired, and more than desired, I craved deep in my soul. And I want that to be passed on, that ability to rise up from poverty that, education gives you. And that's why I decided to eventually change careers for about the third, fourth time and become this public school teacher. And so today I'm going to tell you about a man born right here in Kentucky. And he actually lived here in Elizabethtown for a bit, but he was born in Louisville, Kentucky. He was a man literally born in chains, a man who had taught himself to read when it was illegal to do so. He had to use some subterfuge to do that, but he did. He was a man who served this country in the Navy, in the Army, in the churches, in the schoolhouse, and who, when America still wouldn't give Black people a fair shot, he went out and built his own town to give everyone a fair shot that wasn't getting one and wasn't having one afforded to them. So his name is Alan Allensworth. And I promise you, by the time that we're done tonight, you're going to wonder why you've never heard of him. Deloy, thank you so much for coming here.
No problem.
Blessing me with, give me your perspective on this as a veteran. Let me know why you think we haven't heard this story, So again, like I said, Alan Allensworth was born to slavery on April 7th, 1842, right there in Louisville, Jefferson County. He was the youngest of 13 children. And as a boy, he watched 5 of his brothers and sisters get sold off to cotton plantations in the Deep South. So that's a quote I got from Manual Red Eye. And the Manual Red Eye is a publication from students at DuPont Manual there in Louisville. So let's just let that sink in. Watching 5 of your brothers and sisters get sold off to cotton plantations there in the Deep South. And we say the Deep South, we're talking about all the way down to New Orleans and other places. Gone. 5 siblings just vanished. And that's not history in a textbook. That's a family torn apart. What do you think of that, Deloy? When you hear about that?
It's one thing when you're raised with your siblings, and or the siblings are so much older than you that they leave home for better opportunities. But the opportunities, I'm not going to say they were better. They were sold off.
Yeah.
And
sold down the river. When you talk about it, that's the definition of it, right? Went from the Kentucky River, the Ohio River.
13.
What's that?
Out of 13 siblings.
Yeah, 13.
Most of them are sold.
Yeah. And he had one, we're going to find out, that escaped Kentucky and went all the way up north into Canada. They never saw her again, but at least hey, she was in freedom. But as someone who knows what was like as a child to be beaten because I wanted an education, and my stepdad hated it if I was reading anything that he didn't think fell right into his religious context, that he, in anything that could inspire me to want to be free of being beaten, I would get beaten worse.
And you can compare that to what's happening nowadays. In politics, they're pushing education to be kind of yes, education should be structured, but you need to teach the truth, the honest truth, and not just the good stuff. You have to give both sides of the story, and the real stuff that has happened.
And we need critical thinkers. We're not there aren't any factory jobs to be training kids to. And the education system today was designed 100 years ago to prepare people to be factory workers, to be those automatons who would do what they were told, not question anything, and would be modestly proficient at reading and writing so that they wouldn't put, rat poison in a recipe if they were, in a factory cooking, But that was just the basics of it. They didn't want critical thinkers. They wanted someone who would pull that lever at the factory. But we're past that now. What factory jobs do we actually have here anymore in this nation? I wish we did. I wish we hadn't been sold down the river when it comes to the American worker. But that's the sad reality, is that that happened back in the 70s and 80s. So education, like you're saying, needs to be something where we're teaching. I need to teach kids, in my opinion, to think critically, to read deeply, to know if they're being sold shit or shinola. What do you think of that?
You have to polish them, because the way the push now is, using your electronic device to get information. Yes, it's a tool that you can use to help you create, to help you with a test. Tell the AI to create a couple of questions based on what you have in front of you, what you've learned. So it gives you a different mindset of how to think, to how to produce the answer, or how to reword your answer and get questioned in a different light. But a lot of us we're using that in the wrong way. We're using it to avoid study. So
and when I first started my collegiate endeavors back in, let's see, after my first tour in the Navy, so about 1994, there wasn't as in-depth internet as we have now. It was becoming, the World Wide Web is becoming something, but you still had to go out and read actual books, periodicals, magazines. If I was studying nursing, I had to actually go get nursing journals, or medical journals to study. But we also were taught to recognize the difference between real scientific studies and pseudoscience. And no one's taught that today very well, and especially not in junior high and high school, So we definitely are even further behind when it comes to recognizing what kids read on the internet. We don't teach them how to realize which is made up and not real facts,
mm-hmm.
and which is just someone pushing you an algorithm so that you go down their rabbit hole and they can sell you whatever they want, whether it's a political ideology or an actual product. We're all being bought and sold constantly with the algorithm. We know that.
Oh,
all right. Well, we're getting far away from the story here, but we're still, on track. So again, that was, we were saying, that's a family torn apart, but here's where the story is going to take its first turn. His mistress, this is the lady that, that owned him along with her husband. His mistress assigned young Alan Allensworth to her son, Thomas. And that boy, that white child, taught Alan to read and write, even though it was against the law. Now, let's just think about that. A white kid in antebellum Kentucky breaking the law to teach a black child how to read. That's just one human being seeing another human being and doing the right thing. Of course, there's a little bit more to that, though. I think I was telling you before before we started here. Alan Allensworth, of course, had already been sold off to another family, and ripped away from his mom, but his mom at least still lived in Louisville. And she was able to, see him occasionally, right? somehow get, I guess would maybe doing errands, maybe they'd give her a break from her master. I don't know. But she knew that Tommy, as he was called, was going to be going off to school. And she told her son, like, Alan, you cannot be considered to be fully a man in this world unless you get an education. And to have an education, you have to learn to read and write. But we know that you're not allowed to. It's illegal. So when Tommy goes off to school, he's going to go get his lessons every day. The teachers are going to teach him. When he comes back, play school with him. Have him pretend to be your teacher and you pretend to be his student. He'll think he's playing a game, but you actually sit there and learn from him everything he learns every day. So he actually did that. So that's a subterfuge I was talking about, And of course, the two kids did end up becoming friends, but it didn't initially start off that way, but it did become that way. So there's when the mom found out that her son was teaching their slave to read and write, that threw her into a deep, deep state of anger. She didn't want her N-word learning to read and write. So, what do you remember of Nat Turner, Deloy?
Nat Turner was, oh gosh, besides it was almost a war.
Yeah.
Because of him. But I mean, just having
apparently he had learned to read and write
exactly
from being, I guess, a house slave, and somehow someone had taught him to read and write. I can't remember.
It's just sad.
It is sad. But as he read his own Bible, he started preaching to the other slaves, on the plantation there in Virginia. And this was down there in the Tidewater region, from what I understand, right?
Correct.
So where you and I have been stationed before in the Navy, where the Dismal Swamp is, right?
Oh, yes.
Great Dismal Swamp. So he ended up, he became, basically a, preacher to his folks, and he had a vision, and in that vision, God told him to free his people. He saw blood all over all the cotton and the, in the fields. And, he felt, from what he was reading and his vision from God, that he was told, free the people. So they killed the slave owners' families, once they freed every slave on that plantation, they moved off to other plantations, started doing the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a big uprising. Then once people started, I say white folks started coming after the slaves and him, he hid out in the Dismal Swamp for quite some time, and survived before he was finally captured. And that did you ever go to the Great Dismal Swamp when you were stationed?
No, I didn't. I did not. I didn't take advantage of it.
Hopefully my friend Jeremy Long is watching right now. You've known me long enough to know I love history and I love reading.
Yes.
That's my other. I'm also certified to be a social studies teacher, just because when I was in the Navy, man, I was always taking classes on either literature or history. So that was why I ended up getting triple certified through the troops teachers thing. But I took Jeremy Long and his son. Tell me if I'm off for saying this, but Jeremy, another white sailor like myself from California, had a son who was biracial, and some other children from another marriage, but I took them out there. I'm like, hey guys, we're stepping into history here.
Mm-hmm.
This is where slaves came and were able to evade slave owners and slave holders and get freedom. It's like their step towards that Underground Railroad and freedom. And sometimes, for a long time, a lot of them just live out there. Get off the plantation, live off the swamp. It's quite interesting, wonderful. To me, a wonderful place. But that was not far from where I lived in Virginia Beach. So to turn it back, I'm sorry, get back to the story. I don't want to get off too far. So when that was what, 1835, I think. I don't remember the exact date, but I think it was about 1835, somewhere in the 1830s when Nat Turner did that. The South was in horror because, Deloy, am I incorrect if I say that there were probably more black slaves than there were white people in many of those
Of
places?
course, of
Those
course.
plantations. Yeah. So they
That
were terrified
was
now. They
known.
realized,
I mean,
they,
you need a lot of slaves in those days. You needed a lot of slaves to run your farm. Um, and I mean, they
oh, that's
kind of
how.
made do with what you gave them. As an owner, you had to feed them. You had to make it work. You had to make them kind of thrive in one way or another to keep them working to help you produce out of that land that you had.
I don't know if thrive would be the word I would use, but at least live enough to keep working.
Well,
You know,
you
uh,
wanted to increase the
we're gonna
population also, so you have more
yes.
slaves and stuff like that. That's what I meant.
Well,
Thriving.
and hence the 13 kids that you know
Exactly.
Alan's mom had. Yeah. Do you got the script right there in front of
Yes.
you?
Yes.
You
We're
mind?
about the part where the mistress,
Yeah.
uh, well, he was learning because any friend that if you play with somebody, y'all want to be kind of even keel mentally and be able to, enjoy yourselves and have fun. There was no
Oh,
TV back then.
that's
So,
that's oh man, that's something I'd never thought of in this story too.
I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
that's how it is. You
Yeah.
have a friend that's on the same wavelength as you. So if he kind of
Yeah.
convinced him to teach me what you learned, and
Yeah.
hey, we can play together, and we can have the same ideas, and we can play a lot longer.
That's right.
We wouldn't get bored.
Now,
That's
this
the
was
way
a
I look
rich family too. So, the this family, they basically, well, not basically, they owned one of the largest pharmacy companies in Louisville, in Kentucky.
at.
So they were a distribution company for pharmacies. They would made medicines, bottled them up, and shipped them out. They were a wholesale dealer. So it was about two or three partners, that were in on this. And so, the mom is telling Tommy, stop this. And what does a rich brat do when you tell them to stop something if they're about 9 or 10
They're
years
gonna go
old?
against.
Yeah, I mean, he's only child. It seems like from the story, I mean, yeah, and even if if he was the oldest, which say if he wasn't the only one, but it seems like he probably was. Yeah, he's not going to do that. He's having fun.
Exactly.
I mean, you could think of Alan also, sadly, as being almost his plaything at the same time as a friend too. So you're telling me I can't use my plaything?
And
Have
based
fun.
on the story, on the script that you have, it
Yeah.
talks about the man named Talbot. Because if you know you're if Tommy is going to school and Alan is just during the day, whatever they have him doing, if he's that young, he's not really doing anything. But if the owner can sit there and rent out Alan to the neighbor so he could do something, whatever for the neighbor, and then come back later when Tommy comes home, he can play with Tommy. But based on the script, if you're telling me that, I mean, it worked out. You rented out your property to somebody.
Yeah, and that's what happened. So the mom is just so extremely angry about her son not quitting this game, what she considered just to be a game with Alan Allensworth, that she tells him, okay, well, apparently I've got to do something. So she talks to her husband. By this time, I guess, had passed away. So she talked to her husband's partner, which is Smith, and it's like, hey, I don't know what to do. My son won't quit teaching my slave to read and write, and the slave doesn't want to give up this knowledge he has now of how to read and write. what do I do? And so first, boy, I'm getting ahead of myself. So no, first off, she's like, okay, I'm just going to loan the slave out, like you're saying. Yeah, get her away from my son. You get him away from my son. So she loans him out to Mr. Talbot, who owned some type of store in Louisville. And she didn't know that Mr. Talbot's mom was really who Alan was going to be working for. Mr. Talbot had an elderly mom that and the elderly mom needed a hand, but since he worked the store, he couldn't help his mom all day long, or he'd lose his business.
Yeah.
So Alan was supposed to be that help for Miss Talbot. Well, Miss Talbot is a Quaker. So what do you know of the Quakers and their relationship to slaves?
Quakers, they basically ran for religious freedom. They came to the United States to avoid the Catholics, I guess.
Actually, it was not the Catholics. It was the Church of England who did not like them. Yeah, okay. Because they believed in having no hierarchies of people. They believed in complete freedom. Women could lead their prayer meetings, and they actually rotated. There was no actual set preachers. Everyone was, and it's still this day, this way today. Everyone rotates and delivers some type of message to the group. Everyone's equal, men and women, and they also hated slavery. They were very, very strong abolitionists. So once Alan is sent to live with them, with mainly Miss Talbot, she doesn't have any use for him being a slave. So she gives him his own bed in her room. She buys him new clothes, downtown Louisville. They sit and read every single night for hours. And she realizes there's only so much she can teach him. So St. Peter's Protestant Episcopal Church, which today we dropped the Protestant thing, just called Episcopal Church, was in the West End back then. And they had certain lessons that they allowed slaves to learn. Certain parts of the Bible and certain parts of their, I guess their church, books. I'm Episcopal, so I find this very interesting. And they had, so Sunday school back then was where you taught people to read and write before church, So she took him, even though she was Quaker, she took him to that church to learn these lessons to read and write in Sunday school. I can't quite tell from his autobiography, which I read, how long he was actually with the Talbots before his mistress found out, and again is absolutely enraged, takes him back. He's not on loan anymore, and that's when she's like, okay, what am I going to do? Well, this time now, like I said, her husband had died, and she's like, I can't have this uppity N-word, Now he really, I thought I was teaching him a lesson by taking him away from Tommy, but instead he's gotten even further into education and reading and writing, and he won't give it up. So I think it was Pat Smith is the name, was her now deceased husband's partner's like, hey, I've got my plantation over in Henderson. We'll take him, we'll send him out there. Now, you were mentioning earlier about, the thriving thing. And I said, I don't think so. Did you ever see Trey Parker's Brief History of the United States?
No.
Okay.
I've heard of Trey Parker. He's
South Park. You've watched South Park, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I like to this is kind of I agree with him. I think this is a pretty good quick synopsis on what was going on.
Now it's time for a brief history of the United States of America. Hi, boys and girls, ready to get started? Once upon a time, there were these people in Europe called pilgrims, and they were afraid of being persecuted. So they all got in a boat and sailed to the New World where they wouldn't have to be scared ever again.
Oh, I'm so relaxed.
I feel so much safer.
But as soon as they arrived, they were greeted by savages, and they got scared all over again. So they killed them all. Now, you'd think wiping out a race of people would calm them down, but no. Instead, they started getting frightened of each other. Witch! So they burned witches. In 1775, they started killing the British so they could be free. And it worked, but they still didn't feel safe. So they passed a Second Amendment which said every white man could keep his gun. I loves my gun. Loves my gun. Which brings us to the genius idea of slavery. You see, boys and girls, the white people back then were also afraid of doing any work. So they went to Africa, kidnapped thousands of black people, brought them back to America, and forced them to work very hard for no money. And I don't mean no money like I work at Walmart and make no money. I mean $0. Nothing. Not a zip. Doing it that way made the USA the richest country in the world.
Woohoo! Right? America.
Hits the nail on the head.
Now, I every time I use clips like that, I got to worry. I don't know when YouTube will cut me off. Because sometimes, it's like, oh, this is proprietary. So we'll just pause it here. We'll come back to it. Okay. But that's really what's going on. And this is what now in our story, this is where Alan Allensworth is headed. You know, he's been living in the house for years. Now he's 13, 14, and he's heading off to Western Kentucky, right on the border, actually, though, of Kentucky and Indiana. Of course, Indiana was an anti-slavery state, you know, no slaves were allowed. So by this time, though, we're getting close to the Missouri Compromise. So even if he did escape, anybody was required to send escaped slaves from the free states back to the, you know, southern states. You know, horrible history. But all right, so yeah. Again, the Talbots, they just wouldn't, you know, they made sure he learned, and then now he's sent down to Henderson. So 1854, the mistress made arrangements and sent Alan down to a plantation there in Henderson, Kentucky. So he had to go down. It says that the truth is down the Ohio River from, you know, Louisville, which is on the Ohio. Of course, Ohio is very close to where I live here in Elizabethtown. Goes down the Ohio to Henderson, and he is there and is supposed to put an end to that learning once and for all. Well, Henderson, Kentucky is right here in the state, and this is where they sent a 12-year-old boy, as punishment for wanting to read.
You go now. I'm trying to look at the map.
Yeah. Now you're also someone, you're familiar with Uncle Tom's Cabin?
Yes.
So what did that do for us? Do you remember? For the US of A?
Uncle Tom's Cabin had to do with, oh gosh.
Well, it was slavery. That book. Yeah, slavery. And it was that book that made people, especially up north where there was, you know, wasn't as much or any slavery in a lot of places, start seeing how horrible life was for slaves and how cruel and inhumane it was. Okay. Guess where that cabin is actually set?
Really?
Henderson, Kentucky. It was, the author, Harriet Beecher Stowe, she witnessed when it was her visit to Louisville and then down to Henderson, you know, in this area where she saw the horrors of slavery. And she was in Henderson when she faced, like, I've been out to Henderson. I actually have a picture of the plaque of where that plantation was. It was based off of. Oh, wow. So he was right there. So now now you can imagine he's in the freaking heart of the beast, you know, of where slavery was the heaviest, you know, in the state. Okay. So 12-year-old boy, and again, this is just punishment for wanting to read. You know, wasn't that he didn't work otherwise, but just you cannot want to read, you know, no matter how hard you work. So his new mistress, again, this I said was Pat Smith, was her husband who suggested, you know, well, actually, it was her brother-in-law that suggested they go to, you know, this plantation, and that's where Pat and Hebe Smith are. Hebe Smith is his new mistress, and she assigned him to be a houseboy, and she also would not allow him to continue to do his studies at all. And she would whip him, and the whole family would whip him for trying to do so. But here again, grace is an absolutely amazing thing, right? That's one of my favorite songs is Amazing Grace, still at church. And it showed up in an unexpected place. And as a survivor of child abuse from that stepdad I talked about, man, angels came along in my childhood. Besides my grandparents that were, my mom's parents that were the angels of my life, there were other people just here and there would step in, and then the reason I didn't lose my mind. So here's what happened to him. Also working in the household was a white orphan boy named Eddie. And these two boys became great friends, and they helped each other out a lot. And, Eddie, even though he was white, that was the only thing that kept him from being treated basically almost exactly the same as Alan. He only, the only thing he got that Alan didn't was he was allowed to and required to go to school. Mm-hmm. But Eddie was not good at learning and good at education, and so he ended up being whipped for not learning to read and write, and the two boys made a pact. Alan's like, hey, you bring me your books, I'll read them, and I'll help you learn what you should be learning from them, and so they would sneak off and do that. And of course, they get caught, get beat, but they're great friends. They do it anyway, Now, one of the things I don't have here in the script, but I'll tell you, this is the one that gets to me, man, as like I say, as a survivor myself, stories like this just get to me. So at one point, both of these boys were accused by Hebe Smith of pilfering, stealing some cucumbers from the root cellar. And so she gets out her two whips. She had them, one painted red, one painted blue, had them both named, cute little names, and has the boys stripped naked, go into each, they had to both drink some syrup of Epicac, make them vomit, as you and I know, medical days, and then go into different corners of the room to wait for it to make them vomit. And I guess Eddie vomited first, and then the stench of that made Alan vomit. And she was, the whole time while waiting for them though to vomit, she was apparently a really good Christian lady, a Presbyterian, and she was sitting there singing her hymnal songs, and just praising the Lord while waiting for that vomit to come up. And she thought for sure she was going to get to use those, whips on the boys. But when they vomited, it turned out, nope, there was no cucumbers in the vomitus. So she gave them all a cold biscuit to share with everybody, which they never got. So that was, a treat. Mm-hmm. But no, I'm sorry, I was wrong. Now the next thing that happens, again, it's not in the script, but I'm going to tell it real quick, is she one day was in her parlor reading, and apparently her husband came in from town. He had a banknote. I guess that's kind of like a draft of money, on a banknote. And it's a large sum of money. He hands it to her. She absentmindedly, when she's done reading, sticks it in the book and forgets about it. Later, the husband asks her where it is. You need to use it. And she accuses Alan of stealing it. And so Alan's like, no, I didn't steal any bank draft. And so they bring another, I guess the foreman in, and the husband and the foreman strip him naked again, gag him, bind him with his hands tied to his ankles, and beat him for hours and hours. He, after passing out, coming to, he gives them a story of where supposedly it is, he has to make something up to try to get the beating to stop, and of course they can't find it. They beat him some more, but he passes out so bad that he can't even come to for a bit. And then somewhere in there, the wife finds the banknote, of course, no sorry for,
of course,
beating that way. But it was not long after that, a few more things like that. They got even a worse foreman in who loved to beat the folks even more. And he decides at 14 years of age that he's going to go off to Canada because he is tired of not being able to learn to read and write and being beaten mercilessly for BS. I'm just going to go ahead and say bullshit.
Well,
sorry if you're offended by that. Yeah. So, I'm sorry, actually age 13. So just the cruelty of the plantation was too much for him. So he planned to escape to Canada. He spent 2 weeks at a neighboring farm before returning to the Smiths for punishment. He was hiding out in the woods, going, on farms here and there, saying, "Hey, they're away. I need some food," and then, he goes back. And then later he ran away again. And, he actually escaped being put in inside of a smokehouse, when someone captured him. But he was recaptured. And then the folks, the Smiths sent a letter back to, or a message back to his, rightful owners in Louisville. And they're like, you know what, he's incorrigible. Go ahead and sell him down the river. So he was sold at auction on the courthouse steps of Henderson, Kentucky for $960. You mind looking up for me what we're going on and see how much that'd be worth today? That's $1,855. Let's see how much $960 would be worth today. So $960, folks. I mean, think about that. That is what they valued a 13-year-old boy's life in Henderson, Kentucky in 1855. And why are they selling? For the crime of wanting to read and write and not to be treated like a freaking animal. Jesus H. Christ. So again, sorry, but I'm going to use my sailor verbiage here tonight. If y'all have a problem with that, we can take it up with Jesus later. But so, he was sold on the block in Henderson. So they go down the Ohio River, taking to where
I got the figure.
Yeah, what's the figure?
The figure equivalent today or purchasing power would be $36,000. $36,437.
13 years old, man. That's basically racehorse money,
That back then could buy you a lot of land.
Damn. So he sold in Henderson, and they float him down the Ohio River to where, you get down to, I think, Paducah, and you're now, entering into the Mississippi river country, goes down to Memphis. He's sold again on the auction block in Memphis. And then in Memphis, they ship him farther down the river all the way to New Orleans. So that's truly down the river when you make it all the way down to New Orleans, where the largest trading block was in the antebellum South, Again, I'm sorry that I didn't put this on there, but I know this story so well, and I don't want to, cry in front of you, Deloy, but again, it's near and dear to my heart. So he gets down there to New Orleans, 13 years of age, and when he is in those slave pens with thousands of other human beings crammed in like cattle. Deloy, how much?
At 13.
At 13. Do you want to make any guesses as to the horrors he might have seen while waiting to be sold and hoping to be sold quickly?
I mean, you're in a cage. You have to use the bathroom right then and there. It's not like they're going to take you out open. They're going to feed you scraps. They're going to keep you there. You're there day and night. I mean, I don't want to say horrible conditions, but
Deloy, I want to take it to compare it to something that is currently going on in our history. We know of a certain island that a billionaire took people to, right? Underage people. The things that he did with those underage people there, right? So at 13 years of age, Deloy, he's witnessing girls his age and women older being basically people that are up, that are thinking about buying them, or
I mean,
what can I say to not be crass, but to just say that they're being sexually exploited before being bought and after being bought right there in front of him. They didn't care.
not at all. I
Not,
mean,
not at all. So we're talking, New Orleans, and trying to think of the other place down there in Mississippi. New Orleans had there were two of the richest cities in the U.S. at the time, right? So you're talking millionaires today, billionaires today, going down there, tasting the goods. It's their playground there
yes.
in
I
those
mean, keep in
tents.
mind it has
This is the horrors that a
accents.
man, yeah, this is what a 13-year-old is seeing simply for wanting to learn to read and write. Again, it just because I went through so many beatings, book burnings as a child, and freedom to me is the same thing it was for him. Just wanted to learn to read and write, and I wanted to read many books. Hey, I enjoyed the Bible, but I knew there were other things to read, you know. But and I'd be beat for it. I went through book burnings, with the stepdad. So I know the mindset that he was experiencing. So again, while he's down there, grace, in a way, it's a convoluted thing, but it's still called a bit of grace. The guy that buys him is a slave trader, a horse trader, and a gambler, all wrapped up in one package. So apparently, this guy finds out after he bought him, he realizes that Alan knows how to read, because he recognizes Alan as they're traveling the streets, is reading the street signs and knows is reading them and knows where it's going. And instead of being angry, he's actually delighted. He's like, "Oh, Alan, this is good. That means when I send you on errands, I want to send someone with you, that knows how to read and write. You'll be able to go and come back on your own." And apparently, he actually buys him either used clothes or new clothes. Treats him apparently well for for a slave, and also decides he's going to make him his horse trainer and jockey. So that kind of tells me that Alan must not have been 6'4" like me. I picture him now as kind of a lithe, fit, scrawny, but strong young guy. What do you think?
But in a positive light.
Mm-hmm.
He's
Extreme
appreciated for the talent that he sees in him.
Every talent that he could possibly have, he's appreciated for. Yeah, but
and he's trainable, obviously.
Yeah. Now, apparently, at one point, so this guy's name was Fred Scruggs, and again, this is after being penned in New Orleans, just like livestock. Just man. There were more than 1,000 other human beings with him when he was penned into those slave pens. I don't know if you've ever seen cattle in the market when they're penned in, thousands like
Yes.
that. Yeah. So this new owner, Mr. Scruggs, again, he's not. I'm not saying that he was a saint, because he's not. And I'll tell you a little bit of the story here too that kind of illustrates that. So apparently, Alan was just he was pretty satisfied with what he was going through. But then at one point, and again, it's not in the script, but it's sometimes memorized now from reading his story so many times and just being enwrapped with it. His let's see. Oh, I messed up a little bit there. I see here that he actually was kept in Memphis for a little bit before being sold down the river again. So several years. So I guess he went, from being 13 to probably 15, maybe, when he witnessed that horrible crap in New Orleans. All right, but he's with Scruggs, and Fred Scruggs again bought him for $960, but he's treating him really well, but then after some time, there's this Mississippi slave owner that comes in, and he brought a young, what the back in the days in the book they called mulatto girl with him, and it was obviously his daughter. So he wants to sell off his daughter. I'm sure he wouldn't call him his daughter, but yeah, young girl. So he wants to sell her off, trade her off. He actually wants to trade her off and he says he wants a likely or comely, young man to trade her for. So Fred Scruggs like, oh, I've got one right here, Alan Allensworth, or Alan. Mm-hmm. And so he's like, oh, he's going to get this beautiful, young mulatto girl in trade. And tell me if I'm wrong about using that word today. I don't, but that's, what I'm, getting from reading a book that's over 100 years old, and the owner at first is like, oh yeah, Alan looks like a great, a great trade. But then Scruggs is like, oh, hey, and guess what? He knows how to read and write too. So you can be of good use. And the owner in the Mississippi slave trade is like, what the F are you doing to me? Trying to give me a educated N-word? What the, like he was, now thinks he's getting the wrong end, the raw end of the deal.
Exactly.
Like, no, I'm taking her back. So then Scruggs trades some other young African American that was, about the same age of male for the girl instead. So basically, he gets to see, still he's a teenager. He sees that that girl is now Scruggs is, like, for lack of for just to be, modern, honestly, brutal, to be honest, right? So, well, it turns out he's been in New Orleans for, from Memphis to New Orleans. He's been gone from Kentucky for quite some, years. But in about 1860 and 1861, Scruggs like, hey, we're going to get ready for one of the big races up in Louisville. The track was one of the predecessors to Churchill Downs, right? Like, we're going to go up here to this. It was even a longer race than Churchill Downs' race is today, kind of an endurance race. In 1861, they head up to Louisville. Well, what do you think's getting ready to get kicked off right then? The Civil War. So yeah, that they get up there. This New Orleans, heel realizes with all of his slaves and horses, he better get back to New Orleans. And he realizes he won't be able to take the slaves and horses with him because at this point, the 44th Illinois and Indiana troops, all kinds of northern troops are now garrisoning Louisville, and they're then actually spreading out and creating a defensive line around Louisville because they know that Braxton Bragg is trying to come through, the Confederate general. Mm-hmm. And they're determined to repulse him from Kentucky and drive him back.
They're going to take his horses anyway.
Yeah, so he leaves his horses and his slaves with the caretaker, and is like, hey, if I don't make it back, then do with them as you see fit. Sell them, do whatever. So he ends up, the guy who he told that to own the stables, sells the horses and sells off Allen to a banker in Louisville. So this guy actually owned the Bank of Kentucky. And before he knows it, he's about 12 miles south of Louisville on a 25-acre plantation. This rich banker owns like 2 houses in Old Louisville, and the pride of his ownership is a 25-acre plantation in what is now Shively, Kentucky. Guess what is also on that site now, since I've done some research deep into this myself?
Please tell me, because I'm about to go dig into it.
Yeah, an African-American Baptist church.
Wow.
Located right where that yeah. And I'm going to try to get them involved in this story, but because I don't think they know this, part. So he was there. That was the line of the 44th Illinois, and so now he's about 19 years old. I figure he's born in 42. This is 61. I think I did the math. I think he's about 19, and he goes over to talk to the Union officer that he meets. That's camped right there on the edge, or right in the tree line of this plantation. It's like, hey, I tried 2-3 times to get to Canada. I want to get to Canada. I want to escape. Can you help me? Apparently, I guess the officer must have been an abolitionist-minded guy, It's like, I tell you what, yeah. Well, of course, at that point, African Americans weren't allowed to join the Union military yet. But he's like, hey, we're going to be leaving here in a few days to go chase Bragg, and they were heading to Perryville. There's a big battle there, Like, you can follow us. We'll put you in disguise. We'll give you this old uniform, and you can march with us as if you're one of us, So he smeared mud all over his face, apparently put an old pot in his head. They gave him an old, rifle, and this old uniform, and he marches right down Salt River Road, which is today Dixie Road, which I drive on every day to get to work in Louisville. Takes a right on Main Street, goes right past the Bank of Kentucky, right past his owner with the troops, and marches out of Louisville. Apparently, when he gets out, he could have then, gone across the river into Indiana or Ohio and made his way to Canada. But apparently, he's like, you know what? It seems like this war is about freedom for us. And I'm going to see what I can do. So he volunteers. Since he can't be be a soldier, he becomes a field medic or an orderly. So he is following the troops, working with the Army doctors, doing nursing duties, corpsman duties like you and I did, And so he's at the Battle of Perryville. He's at all the battles in Kentucky, all the way down to the Battle of Nashville, nearly captured along with the doctor that he's working with down there in Tennessee. They barely escape. And when they, get back together, the doctor's like, you know what? We've had a year now of this. I'm going to take some leave. Why don't you come with me to Ohio? He goes to Ohio with the doctor. First real taste of freedom in his life, complete freedom. Gets his own room. They give him his own clothes. Then, let's see, 63 rolls around, the Emancipation Proclamation. So African Americans are allowed to join the Union military. Then Deloy, what does he do?
Raise that right hand.
He raises that right hand and swears to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic, for the United States Navy. That's right, sir. Apparently, when he had been on those boats as he was being sold down the river, first when he went from Louisville down to Henderson, he actually paid a lot of attention to what the boat stewards did. And he was able to talk himself into position of a steward on the ship. So he actually got a good rank just from the beginning, being able to demonstrate
experience.
His experience. Yeah. And buddy, guess what rank he achieves by the time the war is over in 65? I don't want to give away what our rank was, but buddy, he was a petty officer first class.
Look at that.
Yep. So from there, he and his brother, one of his brother, he gets back, finds out that his brothers that have been sold down the river, they're back in Louisville, reunites with his mom, and he and one of his brothers go to St. Louis, start 2 restaurants. Just about get swindled by some white folks there to try to accuse them of a crime they didn't commit, to swindle them out of money. They win their case. Alan's brother decides to take his money and go invest it in another business venture and stays in St. Louis. And Alan's like, I'm going back to Louisville. Comes back to Louisville, gets deeper into education, goes to the normal school, then decides he's going to be a minister, goes down to Nashville, goes to theological school down there, marries a piano teacher, organ player, and they come back to Kentucky. And buddy, every place he becomes a preacher, he also starts Sunday schools. And he gets the nickname, the children's preacher, because all these children start coming to learn to read and write, and then their parents come. So now, like in the West End, the two churches he preached at, they're still in existence. Mount Olivet Baptist Church and 4th Street Baptist Church, still in existence today. He tripled them in size.
Wow.
Next, Franklin, Kentucky had it's still, thriving, smallish town on the border of Tennessee and Kentucky, but it's in Kentucky. They're like, hey, while he was studying, they're like, hey, we'd like you to preach for us. Like they give him a little stipend, and then once he's done with his training, he's their preacher. Is successful there. The church was about to fall apart, but he uses his Navy skills that he learned, to lead and make things organized, keeps them together. Goes back to Louisville. That's where he starts, preaching at Baptist churches, Sunday schools. Then he gets a call to go to Elizabethtown, Kentucky. The oldest Baptist church west of the Allegheny Mountains is here in Elizabethtown. That's Severn Valley Baptist Church. Apparently, even one of my ancestors went there, I think. I was just looking at today at my family tree when I was at the old grave site, thinking about all the story. Yeah. And so right after the war, the white folks left the church to go create another, bigger building. And the African Americans that had, they bought it. And it's their church. But it's about to fall apart in the late 1860s or early 1870s. I think 1870s probably by this time. He's called to Elizabethtown, and again, he uses his skills that he credits from the Navy, teaching him order, discipline. There's I guess a group that is really uneducated, of course, as they almost all were, and more into, I don't know. You have to read I don't want to say things that could come off wrong, but he just really brings this church, the two groups, they're like clashing. He brings them together. He uses all kinds of strong leadership skills and a bit strict
at its core.
Yeah, that church. So they use that church all the way up until, I think the sign says 1994. It's right across the street from my church. And there was a sign there for years that didn't say anything about his story. Okay. It just told the story of Severn Valley Church. It didn't mention that in 65 to 94, it became the African American church, Baptist church, Black Baptist church. But just last year, a new sign was put up there, and it tells now more history, and it tells that history of its, Black Baptist church history that wasn't told before. And it just, gosh, it, blows me away, man, So what's your reaction to him so far? What do you think of this guy? Inspired at all?
I'm inspired. I'm just blown away that it's not talked about.
Dude,
and there's no reason why it's not brought up.
And so there's no mention of him on that sign. I'm trying to get a hold of the First Baptist Church, which is still the historically Black church. That's a mile away now, maybe. I think either a mile, maybe two. I don't think two. I don't think it's that far. It's a few blocks really away. Is the newer, bigger church, that they moved to. Still, it's thriving church, and just the fact that, and I've called them like, hey, do you have any history of this? Do you know any of this? And I haven't found anybody that does, I'm like, so, I want something in Louisville or here to acknowledge this man and what he did. Okay. So, all right, I'm going to go off. I think I'm going to go off script a bit because I just know this story so well. Okay. So he preaches here for a few years, They want him to come back to Franklin. He does. Apparently, you can't go home twice, you know? So it works out, but not like it did the first time. So next he goes to Bowling Green with his wife and, their daughter that has 2 daughters, I believe, maybe 3. They're just thriving. That Baptist church in Bowling Green, still there. Actually, one of my, one of the ladies that goes to church with me, she's also a teacher. She also, I think she just got her master's in, is it African American
Studies,
church music or something like that?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I mean, she's just amazing singer, piano player extraordinaire. But yeah, she told me she didn't know a story. I was telling her about it, but she went to that. She grew up in the church that he preached in for years and years and years. But at one point, he's not. Oh man! So he also is the twice elected to be the Republican National Committee delegate from Kentucky to the Republican National Committee, meeting where they decided who was going to be the presidential candidate for the Republican Party. That's how much clout and standing he had. And both parties, Democrats and Republicans, respected him. He was, he was called to be, to speak in the East, Boston, all over the place. They wanted him to come lecture, preach, all over Kentucky, all over the East Coast. He was renowned,
Mm-hmm.
But at one point, while he was in Bowling Green, he and his wife just look. He's like, you know what? Our daughters aren't going to get the culture that I want them to have, and I think they should have. We've got to take them somewhere else, Right about this time, though, there was also a Buffalo soldier, so African American soldiers that were serving on the plains. One of them happened to come, be in town, and he heard Allen preach. He's like, Reverend Allensworth. He's like, in the Army, the white soldiers, they have their own chaplains, white chaplains, but we don't have a black chaplain. We don't have a chaplain for just for the Buffalo soldiers in our unit. Why don't you become one? Well, at this point, he's like 40, 42 years old, right? And he's like, So he calls in all of his favors with both parties and senators and congressmen from both the Democrats and Republicans, respecting all across the South, all across Kentucky, and he calls in and he's like, hey, would you please would you put me in for a commission as a chaplain in the United States Army? He's the age you and I retired, right? How old were you when you retired?
30, 39.
38, 39. Yeah, I was 42.
Wait, hold on.
So
Yeah, I was nearing 40.
Yeah. I was 42 because I had a little gap there.
Extra time,
first
right?
tour, went to college, and then went back. Yeah, I was Navy ROTC, then went back. So, anywho, yeah. So while he's waiting, for an answer from the Senate and the president, right, and the governor's helping out too in Kentucky, he accepts a call to preach in Cincinnati. That's where he believes he can get that culture, for his daughters and himself, and his wife. And he preaches there briefly. I don't know if it was as long as a year or two, and then they actually commissioned him. So he was the first black chaplain in the Army, or one of the first black chaplains in the Army. And at age 44, he gets a commission as an officer and as a chaplain. So what do you think of that?
It's an honorable mention. I mean, that's the only honorable thing that he's gotten so far.
Yeah. And so, like I say, I just really, really want this town to, and Louisville especially, but he's a part of Elizabethtown.
Mhm.
I want to see Kentucky remember one of their amazing sons. I mean, this is just, I'm so inspired, because the Navy did so much for me. I think it did it do a lot for you too?
I'm, I'm blown
What do
away.
you think?
I mean,
Yeah, and so to see someone that did what we went through. Let me see if I can get this. Hopefully, I can get this to be big. But if not, here's something I filmed. I don't know how to make it bigger. Darn it.
So, it is a beautiful Sunday day here
Oh, here we
in
go. Just a second.
Elizabethtown, and I am on
hmm,
All right, in a second I'll start that. But so I went and filmed where where he did all this. So again, across from my church is the Severance Valley Baptist Church. It's right. So I guess after '94, it must have been bought out by the Shriners. So it's now part of their their hall, which is really cool. It's a historical landmark. We've added another layer to that plaque that never mentioned the African Americans, and that's been added now. And I'll show you right here, if you don't mind.
and I am on the southwest edge of District 3. Do a little walk around, do a little history, show you some of the places, many that I think are awesome here. Starting off in the square, walking on down the square, starting off at Walker Square, and we'll end at Walker Square. So I get the camera person to walk a little faster and keep up with me. So coming down here to the square, of course, we know this is, well, I'd say one of the best parts of this town. We still have an active downtown. Got some great bars down here, restaurants, shopping. We talked about.
So this is where Alan Allensworth would have walked.
Going to show. We've got running souls over here.
This is the old Elizabethtown.
Running souls walking to. We've got great coffee shop here that we all can go to here. Of course, we've got the cannonball that she's going to point to up here that is replica of the one that was lodged in a wall.
And that camera person did a pretty good job, didn't she?
Back in
Yeah.
1862.
That's something.
John Hunt Morgan came here and lobbed into the city during the Christmas time. So he was firing from the graveyard, which we know is over that way. And we've got Summer and I, my camera person, we've got some of our ancestors buried in that graveyard. So it's coming down this way. And I promised the camera girl that we're going to come here soon to Mud Puddle Pottery Company, because this looks like it's got to be a fun place. Fun here.
All right, I'm going to fast forward a little bit to what we really need to hear.
Okay.
Because I know you are on a schedule. So we're moving through.
Of those liaisons would go on to get his freedom by going to Camp Nelson in Kentucky. He escaped slavery from Paris, Kentucky, went to Camp Nelson, and once he joined the U.S. Army there, that got him his freedom. Then,
So that's another side story. John Hunt Morgan, that Confederate man who fired upon Elizabethtown on the Christmas raid. He was a slave owner from. He had a plantation in Paris, Kentucky. He actually was from Alabama originally. Well, he had a child with one of his slaves. That child had a child who was Garrett Augustus Morgan, who would later, when he should have been in the 7th grade, but Kentucky wouldn't send him to school anymore in the 1870s. He went over to Ohio, Cincinnati, started working in a factory there at age 14, I guess, and used his money there to hire a teacher to teach him English and grammar that he should have gotten in Kentucky but didn't. And guess what he invented later? Gas mask, traffic lights. Another story. Yeah. Similar to, we got a lot of interesting stories like that from here.
Wow.
When that freed slave, who was a son of John Hunt Morgan, had a son, his son, if you look this up, is the person who invented the gas mask. The gas mask that firefighters still use, self-contained breathing apparatus, and the same gas mask that would save soldiers from German gas in World War I. So look up that Morgan. You're going to find that Morgan was amazing. But he had to go to Cincinnati and then to Cleveland to do his work because Kentucky would not let him get an education after the age of 13. Once he completed the 6th grade and was functionally illiterate, he went over to Ohio to work when he should have been in school in the 7th grade if he had been white in Kentucky. But instead, went across the river, started working in a factory, spent his money after working a 12-hour day. He would spend his money then paying a tutor after work to teach him English that he should have gotten for free if he lived in Ohio instead of been born as a descendant of a slave in Kentucky. But that is another part of our history tour. Come on over here, and I'm going to briefly take hold of the camera as we walk this way. So we're walking down now to the original Severns Valley Baptist Church. So you see here, we're now coming up to Poplar. We got the original Severns Valley Baptist Church. So this is the oldest Baptist church
back in the day. Amazing Grace.
West of the Allegheny Mountains. And it has stood here for quite some time. So my church is right around the corner. You'll be able to see it here in a second. And here is, first up, Severns Valley Baptist Church, like it says, the oldest continuing Baptist church west of the Allegheny Mountains, started in 1781, before Elizabethtown became part of Kentucky. Kentucky wasn't even a state yet. We were still part of Virginia, just a county of Virginia, of course. But look over there, you can see my church. But of course, we know now this is part of the Shriners Club. But the interesting thing is, if you look over here, this was an active church until 1974. Now, I've come here and I've looked at this sign many times. If you notice, they talked that the services were held here all the way till 1974. And this sign has been up here since 1977, right? This place was placed on the historical places list back then. But what wasn't there was a missing part of that history, which you can read from the sign. If you come over here now, you can see this sign telling you that this actually was also the first Black Baptist church, right? And so this became Hardin County's first Black Baptist church in 1866. And if you have a chance to come into town here, when you scan this, it will give you not just something for you to read, but you can actually have an augmented reality. You'll have a preacher pop out. You'll hear the African-American choir singing inside the church. And you'll actually find out that when the white folks left after the Civil War, Severns Valley white Baptists moved on, and the Black Baptists kept this place going. Well, it was about to
go under as a black church. But in the 1870s, there was a freed slave named Allen Allensworth. He would go on to become Colonel Allen Allensworth. Now, Colonel Allen Allensworth was born in 1840. So, all right. So that takes us, he's left Cincinnati, he's left Kentucky, and he gets a commission in the U.S. Army. So next, what he does is he's stationed out, I think it's Fort Sill or somewhere out there in Oklahoma, Army base.
Mm-hmm.
He starts he's not just a chaplain. He starts a school for every freed slave that's now a soldier for their kids to learn to read and write. He also is the base treasurer. Now, yeah, buddy, you got that started a lot. Look, tell anybody, you and I know what that means. You want to tell anybody that's listening what that means? If you're the base treasurer, in addition to be the preacher and the teacher for all the kids,
you have a lot of not only pull, but you see what comes in and what the fiscal. Oh gosh, you're in charge of a lot of the things. You
exactly.
have a vision of what comes in and what's divvied out for the whole base.
And he's also responsible for it.
Yeah, exactly.
Like if anyone was trying to rip anybody off, he'd make sure, no, you're not. This is how much money there should be. I mean, dude, he had to be a jack of all trades.
He had fiscal responsibility.
So in his whole career, so Oklahoma, Utah, Montana, I think New Mexico, he was in so many different places. They wouldn't let black soldiers, the Buffalo Soldiers, serve anywhere east of the Mississippi River. They didn't want those former slaves with guns back there where they used to be brutalized. But so there he's out there. They're doing every place he goes. He's educating kids and educating adults. So all these people like himself that had never been allowed to learn to read and write, he makes sure every single soldier was learned to read and write. But he also recognized something, Deloy. He recognized, wait, I teach the kids to read and write this way, and they have these certain things they should learn to read and write about, and skills they should learn. But I'm teaching these adult men. These adult men need skills as an adult. I'm talking farriers. I'm talking, people that know how to do iron work. I'm talking about men who need to learn how to figure out the trajectory of a cannon. I can't teach them the same way that I teach children. He said that, and he recognized that. I wish I had an example, but I didn't bring it, of a letter that he wrote to Congress. Deloy, I've been certified a genius when I was in school before homeschooling, and his vocabulary was far well beyond mine. In the letter he wrote explaining how he needed to not just have funding for the kids' schools, but he needed to be able to create an adult curriculum, and he needed U.S. Army funding for an adult curriculum. His request was granted because of his extreme, yes, sir. It was used for years and years and years, his training manual for adult education. Again, dude, why don't we know this? Now, okay, Deloy, I know that I promised you I wouldn't kill more of an hour every time, and I've done so, but can I tell you just a little bit more?
Go ahead.
So, dude.
Come on, man.
Right. So we started off 1870s. He does a whole 20-year career. So that takes us up to and beyond the Spanish-American War, right? So when the Spanish-American War starts, it's, we're looking at 1890s, right? Mm-hmm. He's stationed out in Utah. They're like, hey, we need a lot more of these Buffalo Soldiers to go fight down there in Cuba, Philippines, Puerto Rico. This is going to be a big war. We need more of these Buffalo Soldiers. We need more of these African Americans. How are we going to do it? Oh, hey, well, we know we've got that intelligent guy stationed over there and preaching and teaching over there and doing treasurer work over there at the base in Utah. Why don't we send him back to Louisville, see if he can scrounge up any more of those fellas? I don't have the numbers, dude, but it was something like they wanted him to recruit 3,500. He recruited 5,500. They sent him back TAD, sent him on TAD orders to Louisville. He far exceeded the recruiting demands, and he had a hard time of it, because there was people here that didn't want to see these men leaving, to join the army. But he did it. Goes back. They're like, holy mackerel. So we need more. Let's send him down there to Knoxville, Tennessee, and have him recruit Tennessee, Alabama, Mississippi, and Georgia, Louisiana. Sure enough, again, far exceeds their recruiting. So Deloy, what does that mean? Think about it.
He's he is a known person that can bring in people. He's an influencer. I'm not gonna say TikTok, but I mean, back in the day, that he had the mouth, he had the tongue, he had the sway, he had the swag. I mean, what can you ask for?
I mean, talk about a man blessed. He felt he was blessed by God. Now think about what battles are so famous in our military history from the Spanish-American War.
Spanish-American War. We're talking what the Cuban
Buffalo soldiers, man. What do we know? Oh, and what else? What did the Buffalo soldiers do there in that Spanish-American War?
You're gonna have to cover that one.
So we got old, man in the arena. We got Teddy Roosevelt, right? He decides he is going to grab a bunch of cowboys, make his own unit, and go down there to San Juan and Cuba and become a hero, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you realize that if you were to look at what happened in San Juan, it was actually the Buffalo soldiers that carried the water for that battle, but they didn't get the credit. If you were to widen out the pictures of the Buffalo soldiers, when they did, when he made it, of course, he took a picture of Teddy Roosevelt and the Rough Riders, right?
Mm-hmm.
You saw the whole wide view of that picture. They're surrounded by Buffalo soldiers. The Buffalo soldiers had gone up and taken the massive casualties and actually taken the hill and actually rescued his ass. And yet he wanted a honor,
Gosh,
for that battle. Yeah. So let me just quickly give you a shot of that. So what else does that mean, though? It took me a couple times to reread, look at videos, and think of this, and to realize who was in this frickin' picture right here, brother. Probably an ass load of Kentuckians.
Yeah.
San Juan Hill. He over recruited in Kentucky when he was sent to Louisville to recruit. He over recruited in Kentucky, goes back from his TAD to Utah, and then they sent him back to Knoxville to recruit the rest of the former antebellum South and to get former slaves and their children to join the Buffalo soldiers. And those guys performed. I mean, go do some research on it, man. They carried water in San Juan. They carried the water in Cuba. They carried the water in the Philippines. So this is with no
mentions.
There's more awareness was being made, but now we're trying to cover that up, with our new Whiskey Pete Keg's Breath, erasing any signs of this, from the military.
You're not going to get much out of that.
So, dude, he did just amazing career, dude. He retired His last duty station was Fort Harrison, Montana. That's where all the Buffalo Soldiers had 2 duty stations in Montana. Missoula was one of their big outposts, and Fort Harrison, which is in Helena. That was my last place. That was the last hospital I worked at in the VA. I took care of COVID patients there, rescued a lot of people from, COVID. They had me working as basically as a corpsman during COVID right there in Fort Harrison at that hospital. I didn't know how hallowed the grounds were when I was there. I didn't know the story when I was there. I would have done, I would have a lot more videos and research, dude. I didn't know his story. I didn't know there was another Kentuckian that I was walking where he walked on the base that he walked at. Yeah. So he retired in let's see what my script says there. Because he did a 20-year career,
1906.
1906. Then it's not over yet. He's out in Cali and he's talking to other luminaries, and and they're like, guys, we can't seem to get over this plantation slave mentality that they have of us. We just want to. He apparently, when it came to that battle between, do we go the W.B. Du Bois route or do we go the George Washington Carver route? He took the George Washington Carver route. Okay, you want us to be separate, and you say that we need to, pull ourselves up our bootstraps. Well, we can't do that with you when you're holding us back. We'll do it separately if you insist. So he's like, okay. He talked to a bunch of other luminaries, like, we need to start our own town, our own farming town, where we can buy and sell and trade on our own terms, grow things on our own terms, no middlemen to screw us, So they started a town in the valley out there in California, and it's named Allensworth, California. There is an Allensworth State Park in California that you and I didn't get to visit when we were stationed out there. Dude, their own schools, their own libraries, their own, they for a while they prospered and flourished. Then apparently, the script probably tells us 1916. Some teenagers ran over him on a motorcycle, some white teenagers in Monrovia, California. Yeah, when he got off a train one day. I don't mean to cut the story short, but I know you're short on time. And I had one more thing there that I'm going to do a 6-minute run through.
Okay, go for it.
You cool with that?
Yep, go ahead.
All right, y'all. We're going to segue a little bit. Hopefully I haven't killed your attention, but this is an amazing story of an amazing man. And Kentucky, man, we've got heroes that we just, Lincoln was amazing. We've got other people too, So I'm going to try to every now and then mention them. But tonight we need to talk about our current heroes, how we're treating people like I'm going to call him Chief Deloy Shaw here, who's with me, retired Navy, and myself. We're combat vets, and we rely on the care that we receive in the VA, and we rely on it actually doing, what should have been done, and us being given that promise that Lincoln made to us. First, let's give a quick shout out to the people that are saying hello here. We got Anna Sombia saying hi. Is that your friend or mine? Hello there, Anna.
You got someone named Brawler Bo?
Brawler Bo. Do you remember me? Man. See, now Brawler, I probably didn't know him as Brawler Bo.
Hey, that's all right.
Yeah. Michelle says hi. Hello, Michelle. We got Slow Houses. All right. We got Brawler Bo. Do you remember me? I was chilling at the temple. Interesting. All right. So now there were promises made to us, just like there were promises, I'm sure, made to Alan Allensworth when he retired, So this next section, we're going to call it They earned it. The VA, rural veterans, and the fight for Elizabethtown's clinic. Now you can, look at this as being any VA clinic in small town or middle-sized town America. But we were promised something, and the deliverables are fading out. So welcome back, guys. If you just started here with us, this is the Hillbilly Think Tank. I'm your host, a Navy FMF corpsman, just like my buddy here. We're both combat vets, former VA employees, now working elsewhere. I'm a public school teacher, and I'm a candidate for Hardin County District 3 Magistrate. Today, we're going to continue here. We're going to talk about something that hits me right in the chest, as I'm sure it does Deloy, because it's personal, it's local, and it's urgent. We're about to lose something in this country that took 161 years to build. And if we lose it, the people who will suffer first and worst aren't politicians in DC, are they, Deloy? They're veterans living in rural communities like ours, right here in Hardin County, right here in Kentucky, and right over there in Stafford, Virginia, where you are, I'm sure too, right?
Everywhere.
Everywhere. So let's talk about the VA. There's a quote carved into the stone of the Department of Veteran Affairs building in Washington, D.C. It comes from Abraham Lincoln's second inaugural address, delivered one day before the Civil War ended. It says, quoting Lincoln, "To care for him who shall have borne the battle, and for his widow and his orphan," unquote. That was the promise. That has been America's promise to its veterans since 1865. And remember, we just had a story about a man who ended his first military career in the Navy in 1865. And then he went on later to do
back for more.
Yeah. So right now, that promise is being broken quietly, methodically, and on purpose. The Veterans Health Administration is, in fact, America's only socialized medicine system, albeit one that serves a small slice of the population. Like healthcare systems in the United Kingdom or Scandinavia, the government owns and operates all VA facilities, and all VA employees are on salary. Now, I know some of you just heard the word socialized and your ears perked up, but hear me out, because the VA isn't a political talking point. It's a lifeline, and it works. VA physicians are salaried, not paid fee for service, which means they have no financial incentive to overtreat patients. Think about that. And studies have shown that the VA is the only healthcare system that consistently follows the standard of care for patients with low-risk prostate cancer. That's watchful waiting. While outside the VA, men are far more likely to receive unnecessary surgery or invasive radiation. That's not a broken system. That's a system that's doing its job without a profit motive getting in the way. Now, let me tell you about a man named Bruce Carruthers. He's 81 years old, a Vietnam veteran, lives in Waynesville, North Carolina. He drives 36 miles to the nearest VA medical center, where he's been treated for prostate cancer, most likely caused by his exposure to Agent Orange in Vietnam. And this very well could be my dad, because my dad died from Agent Orange cancer. So let's listen to Bruce's story. A few weeks ago, he noticed a suspicious mole on his neck. He sent a message to his VA physician and got an immediate response. A same-day referral to a dermatologist who quickly booked an appointment. He said, quote, "This would never happen in the private sector, at least not in rural America. I would have had to wait months," unquote. That's the VA working the way it's supposed to. Mm-hmm. And that is what is at stake. Now, Deloy, I see you nodding your head. Would you mind just give me a little amen and hallelujah and how it's going? Tell me what's up.
I could tell you that, yes, the VA system, they have a lot of people that they focus on you. Um, Now they're more getting more technologically advanced where you can get visits, through your phone when it comes to mental health. Um, yeah, I've had many appointments through my phone where I talked to my mental health doctor, and we had plenty of discussions. He was finding out how I was doing and all that stuff. Um,
And I have too. I want to just pause just for a second. When we say on our phone, we actually are talking about through a video conference, though, too, right?
Video conference.
He can
Yes,
see me, I can see him or her, the
yes.
provider. So it's not like, we're just talking, but they can see what we're going
Yeah,
through.
definitely not like vocal. No, they're looking at you and they're noticing everything about you, how your mood is. They ask you all the questions and all the pertinent questions. Um, and they offer you to come in, but in this light, if they can use the technology of a phone in appointment, it's a lot easier on people.
Absolutely. So here's a number that I need everyone to sit with for a moment. About 1 in 3 enrolled veterans, that's roughly 2.7 million people, lives in a rural area. And for many of them, the VA isn't just the best option, it's the only option within reach. The VA has established nearly 788 community based outpatient clinics, CBOCs as we call them,
Hmm.
throughout the country. And most rural veterans live within about a 44.5-mile range of a VA facility. Now, when I worked for the VA Deloitte, I was after retirement, in Montana. Man, I think I hit every single rural VA clinic there was, because I would, whenever someone had to take a vacation and they did my job, there was only one of them.
Hmm.
I would go out and do that 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, whatever it took. It was amazingly eye opening. But man, some of these places were remote,
Yes.
very remote. Now, here's where this gets very local for us. Think about us here in Hardin County and even Stafford, where you are, Deloy. There is a VA community based outpatient clinic, a CBOC, coming to Elizabethtown, Kentucky. Can you believe we don't have one up until now, Deloy? There is one on Fort Knox, but still not outside of the base. And Hardin County has the highest percentage, ratio of veterans in the whole state. So, guys, this is going to be right in our backyard. I mean, it's just going to be right across from the edge of my district if I'm elected to magistrate in District 3. It's going to be less than, I think, 2 miles from my house. So, right in our backyard.
Wow.
Now, a Dallas-based developer has been awarded the VA contract for a 62,000 square foot facility on Pear Orchard Road off of Ring Road. Construction was set to begin this past winter with an opening plan for spring or summer 2027. Well, I just drove over there this weekend and I noticed there, I was noticing some construction, like, oh my God, they're tearing down the trees. Then I realized, oh, wait, that's where the clinic's going.
Yep.
So we're getting a brand new Publix. Everybody in the area knows, with some, other shops springing up. Everybody's excited about the Publix. Well, I'm extremely excited that right across the street from it, this VA clinic's being built. Now, this clinic will offer primary care, radiology, mental health, which you were just talking about, physical therapy, and other specialized services. Of course, this will mean all of this will be in person
Hmm.
care that we can get for each one of those things. Now, someone who is, say, located maybe in western part of the state that doesn't want to drive 45, 50, 60 miles, yeah, they could, I'm sure, do some of the telehealth with that also, as we already have from the clinic in another county over. Anyway, Developers, they say that this project will bring up to 150 jobs and more than $400,000 a year in property tax revenue to this community. Now, let me say that again. 150 jobs, $400,000 a year in property tax revenue right here in Hardin County. That's not just healthcare, that's economic development for our community. More importantly, it means a veteran in this district won't have to drive an hour and a half to Louisville to get a checkup or a mental health appointment. It means catching problems early. It means showing up. It means the VA's promise is being kept right here on Pear Orchard Road. Now, when first started,
I will say what you're missing is the needs are being met. So I'm glad they covered that. They did their studies. They found out they needed some kind of an establishment to take care of the community of veterans.
Well, but here sadly there's a question though that nobody in Washington wants to answer concerning this. Who is going to staff it? The Trump administration and Doge have been gutting the VA workforce at breathtaking pace. You know that, right? Yes. Thousands of VA employees, doctors, nurses, mental health counselors, administrative staff, like you and I used to be, have been fired, pushed out, or left because of the chaos. If you destroy the workforce pipeline, it doesn't matter how beautiful that building on Pear Orchard Road is going to be. A 62,000 square foot clinic with no one in it is just a very expensive empty room. Now, let me tell you what the VA actually does for Deloy and me, because too many people don't know. And the people who want to privatize it are counting on your ignorance, because that's what they want to do. They wanted to cut all these people in order to privatize the care that Deloy and I receive. The VA is the nation's largest research institution outside of the National Institutes of Health. Now, the Deloy, you worked for that part of it, as you were just telling us, man. Mm-hmm. You know that it developed barcoding for medication administration, the first implantable cardiac pacemaker, the nicotine patch, and the first shingles vaccine. They all came out of VA research. It established the link between football concussions and chronic traumatic encephalopathy. And its million veteran program has assembled the largest genomic database in the world, helping researchers better understand and treat anxiety, heart disease, cancer, Parkinson's disease, and more. Now, over 70% of the nation's physicians have received training at VA facilities. Guys, that's phenomenal. That's a lot. And if we try to privatize this, we're losing an amazing, enormous, and bountiful place for physicians to get amazing training. Now, nearly 90% of educational institutions partner with the VHA, Veterans Health Administration, and a $900 million a year training program. And in times of disaster, the VA Medical Center in Puerto Rico was the only functioning hospital on the island during and after Hurricane Maria. And it was open to non-veterans.
Yes.
During COVID, VA facilities cared for non-veteran patients in overwhelmed hotspots like New York, New Jersey, and Louisiana. So this is not a broken bureaucracy at all. This is a national asset, and it is our community asset too, right here in Elizabethtown. So why is it being dismantled? Well, before we go on to answer why it's being dismantled, Zoe, I know I'm killing your time, but can you tell me a little bit about what you saw about research that I missed there? Because I know that VA research is amazing. What did you witness?
I witnessed that they're very in depth. They really want to take care of the people. They are looking at every option available. They're using all the resources to get the right type of care. Um, that's their goal.
And
Treat
it
you
benefits the whole nation, not just veterans, too,
correct.
right?
It's passed around. Knowledge is shared, and because they use a lot of these universities, they staff with a lot of practicing interns and stuff like that, and they share the knowledge. I wanted to say share the wealth, but
It's
the
sharing the
wealth
wealth
is the knowledge.
because those,
People get good practice. I mean,
yeah,
I will tell
I've
you,
gotten amazing care from those.
we
interns.
as medical corpsmen, we part of our training was to spend, I believe it was what, 2-3 weeks at a VA.
Yeah, you went to Great Lakes like I did. Yeah,
Yes, yeah.
yes, sir. Yep, we got to work at the VA. It was amazing. So, and that was before we were employees there, years before we were employees there. Well, so let's talk about why is it being dismantled? Over the past decade, a powerful movement funded by billionaire industrialists, including the Koch brothers and dark money allies like Elon Musk, backed by the hospital, medical equipment, and pharmaceutical industries, has been working to privatize the VA. Let me translate that for you. There are people who look at 9 million veterans receiving coordinated, salaried, nonprofit health care and see 9 million customers they're not getting. They don't want to improve the VA. They want to replace it with something that sends veterans into the private market, where those industries can bill them, upsell them, and profit from them. And if that happens, if that network of VA clinics gets dissolved into a voucher system in communities like ours, where the private healthcare system is already stretched thin, there may be nothing to go to. That brand new clinic on Pear Orchard Road becomes worthless. Now, I want to be real with you. I worked at the VA. I served as a Navy Fleet Marine Force corpsman, independent duty corpsman. I've seen this system from the inside, and I know it isn't perfect. No system is, but I also know what it means to a veteran in a rural county to have a place that was built for them, staffed by people trained for them, that treats the whole person, body, mind, homelessness, legal troubles, and all. Study after study has confirmed that the care of the VHA delivers not only equals, but very often it surpasses the care in the private sector. And surveys show that veterans highly value their dedicated healthcare system and want to see it improved and expanded, not gutted. What do you say? Do you agree with that, or am I just talking
That's the
nonsense?
God honest truth. And I mean, I hate to admit it, but that's what's going on today.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, the veterans I know and that Deloy knows didn't serve this country so a billionaire could find a new revenue stream in their cancer treatments. My dad died of cancer in the VA, but I don't blame the VA. I am grateful that they treated him. So what can you do? Call your representatives, Senators McConnell and Paul, your congressmen. Tell them Hardin County needs that Elizabethtown clinic fully staffed and fully funded when it opens in 2027. Tell them you won't accept a building without the people to run it. Tell them the promise Lincoln made in 1865 still means something in Hardin County in 2026. And remember, Lincoln was a Hardin County boy because where he was born was still part of Hardin County back then.
Wow.
And if you're a veteran, get enrolled in the VA if you haven't. Because a system that isn't being used is a system that's easier to cut. And if you're not a veteran, remember this. When the VA goes, rural healthcare everywhere gets worse. That clinic on Pear Orchard Road isn't just for veterans. It's a signal that this community is worth investing in, that our people are worth showing up for. Y'all, this is the Hillbilly Think Tank. I'm a veteran. Deloy's a veteran. We're both former VA employees. I'm running to represent District 3 in Hardin County Magistrate Court, the fiscal court. And I'm telling you, this fight is our fight. Take care of each other out there, folks. And remember, it is for Deloy and for me and for all of us veterans, but it's also $400,000 that we could use in this fiscal court. That $400,000 is something that, man, that shouldn't be just an afterthought. That means so much to Elizabethtown and to this whole county. Y'all, we are our brother's keeper. We are our sister's keeper. We know that Kentucky's motto, united we stand, divided we fall, that's not just a catchword. If we truly love our neighbors as ourselves, we can't be divided. We can't fall. So remember, everyone deployed overseas tonight, bless your corazon and have a great rest of the week. Thank you so much, Deloy, for coming out and sharing these stories tonight and contributing. Bless you, brother.
All right. You have a good one.
You too. Thank you so much. Good night.
Beans shipping cross country on refrigerated trucks. And third, they take them home and cook than modern bush beans. In the 50s and 60s, convenience became king, and TV didn't soaking overnight got made But here's what they couldn't tell. Old-fashioned means it actually works. Your great-grandfather didn't grow salad runners because they were tender. He grew them because when the bank foreclosed on farms across the